All right, for this explainer, we're diving into a pretty radical idea. What if the real engine driving history wasn't the king on his throne or the general on the battlefield? What if it's always been hidden away in the unseen machinery of logistics, the rivers, the cargoes, and, most importantly, the people who control the flow?
So let me just ask you this. What if the history we all learned in school, the story of great kings and epic wars, is really just a cover story? What if the real power, for something like 2,000 years, was held by a single group operating completely in the shadows?
Let's just break this down for a second. Over on the left, you've got what we'll call official history. It's all about kings, armies, dynasties, you know the drill. But on the right, that's what our source material calls the real engine. And it's a story about river crossings, toll booths, and checking cargo lists. Now, it might not sound as exciting, but as we're about to see, that is where the real power has always been hiding. To really understand how this engine works, we're going to follow the story of one family, the Gardeners. They supposedly perfected a system, a repeatable blueprint for gaining power, and they used it all the way from the Roman era right through to the American frontier. And what's so wild is that their blueprint is, well, brilliantly simple. It's just a three-step process. First, you get control of a physical choke point. Think a key river crossing where everything has to pass. Second, you secure the ancient rights. That's the legal paperwork giving you the authority to charge a toll. And third, you audit the flow. You become the person who counts all the goods, which, of course, gives you the perfect chance to skim a little something off the top. Now, here's a really crucial detail, the name itself. The source material argues that the name gardener is a total mistranslation. It's got nothing to do with being a gardener. It actually comes from the old French word garda, which means to watch or to ward. See? They weren't growing flowers, they were the guardians of the gate. Okay, so let's jump into our first case study and see how this blueprint was really put into action. We're heading to medieval London, which is where the Gardeners supposedly perfected their prototype for this river machine. And this is the origin story. The family's power didn't come from some royal decree. Nope, it started with simple geography. They controlled what you could call the primal pulse of London, the original Roman ford on the river Thames. This was the exact spot where the first cargo barges had to drop their gates. So from the very first day, not a single thing got into London without going through them first. So how did they actually build this incredible machine in London? Well, it was a three-part play. First, they got their hands on the incredibly valuable wool trade, the Golden Fleece of England. Then they teamed up with the Hanseatic League, a super powerful trading guild, to move all those goods tax-free. And this is the most audacious part. They got themselves hired as the Crown's own auditors, which let them build a parallel treasury by skimming right off the king's books. So you've got the money, and you have total control over the flow of goods. What's the next logical step? Well, you start using that logistical power as a weapon. And what's the biggest target? A king. You know, we all think of the War of the Roses as this big family feud between nobles, right? York versus Lancaster. But this completely reframes the whole conflict. It wasn't just nobles fighting nobles. It was the rising power of the counting house, the merchant class, taking a direct shot at the established feudal crown. And here's the war chest that made it all possible. The sources estimate that this Gardeners Syndicate funneled £40,000 in untaxed cash from their wool skimming operation. Now, in the 15th century, that's an absolutely staggering amount of money. It was more than enough to go out and hire a private army to invade England. And this timeline, it just lays out the whole operation. You can see exactly how logistics won this war. The Gardeners' buddies in the Hanseatic League, they provided the ships. Henry Tudor's army gets a free ride to Wales, landing at Milford Haven. And what's the end result? The Battle of Bosworth Field. The victory was basically locked in by controlling the supply chain long before the first sword ever left its sheath. And then, you get this, the final, absolutely stunning move. According to a Welsh chronicle, it was a leader of this whole merchant syndicate, a man named William Gardiner, who personally killed King Richard III with a poleaxe right there on the battlefield. Think about that. This wasn't just about financing a coup. This was a true mercantile coup, where the guy from the counting house literally takes the crown with his own two hands. So once you've perfected a system like this, once you've used it to put your own king on a throne, what do you do next? Well, you export it. Let's take a look at how the river machine was rebuilt piece by painstaking piece over in the American colonies. And this table just lays it all out. The genius here is that it was basically a franchise model. The system was identical. In London, the choke point was the Thames, and the resource was wool. Okay, now look at Philadelphia. Just swap the Thames for the Schuylkill Ferry, and you swap wool for furs. Then you go out to the Dakotas. The choke point is the Missouri River, and the resource, well, it's furs again. It's the exact same system, just on a different continent. And they were meticulous about it. This wasn't just a vague copy. In 1682, a John Gardner sets up the Middle Ferry in Philadelphia, a perfect carbon copy of their London operation. And to get the furs from the interior, they built the Headwater brewery system. This system made alcohol, what they called the liquid key, which they then floated downriver to trade for pelts. The blueprint was absolutely identical. Okay, so you've got this system, right? It's been running for almost 2,000 years. It outlasted actual empires. So what in the world could possibly be powerful enough to finally break it?
So what finally broke it? It wasn't another king. It wasn't some rival army. It was technology. The railroad. The iron horse completely changed the game of logistics. All of a sudden, goods could travel overland, totally bypassing the river choke points that had been the source of all this power for millennia. Just like that, the ancient machine was obsolete.
And that just leaves us with one final and, I think, pretty critical question for today. The original river machine might be gone, but that blueprint, control the choke point, secure the rights, audit the flow, that's timeless. So it kind of forces us to ask, what are today's river machines? Is it the digital pipelines? The financial clearinghouses? What about the servers that hold all our data? The principle is exactly the same. The only thing that's changed is the river.